The act of killing. In 2003, Joshua Oppenheimer, an American filmmaker, found himself in a Belgian-owned palm plantation near Medan, Indonesia, when he realized the workers wanted to form a union but were worried of doing so because their grandparents, allegedly pro-communists, had been killed during the genocide in the mid-1960s. So he decided to make a documentary about the mass killings in Indonesia during that time. The workers even suggested that they film the genocide's perpetrators. He liked the idea, and with the help of a death squad leader, he managed to contact former members of the paramilitary group, including retired military officers from the capital, Jakarta, and 2 retired CIA officers from the United States. Shockingly, the people he met were proud of their acts. He decided to reenact the killings of communist sympathizers and intellectuals, among others. The scenes included cold-blooded executions, mutilations, rape, torture, etc. They were so horrific that Oppenheimer himself felt traumatized, collapsed in exhaustion, and started suffering from nightmares and insomnia. He said it was like wandering into Germany 40 years after the Holocaust only to find the Nazis still in power. Many of the Indonesians who worked on the film are not credited by name. Instead, they appear as anonymous for fear of punishment for their participation. As Oppenheimer was directing the documentary, he received support from genocide survivors and human rights advocates, but top officials were not happy about it. Because of the heated political climate in Indonesia, the movie was not submitted to the Film Censorship Board, as it was very likely to be banned, and because doing so would have made every Indonesian who watched it a criminal. It wasn't officially banned, but was heavily censored, given that the people who committed the genocide were still in power, so much so that the documentary's sound editing took place in Indonesia's state television network, which was dominated by gangsters. The film premiered in the country only for filmmakers, authors, advocates, educators, and organizations supporting genocide survivors. However, due to the positive reception, any Indonesian could watch the movie if they requested a DVD copy. On September 30th, 2013, the day of commemorating the genocide, the film was authorized for a free online release exclusively for Indonesian viewers. Under the Sun. In 2013, Vitaly Mansky, a Russian film director, wanted to make a documentary about life in a country resembling the Soviet Union to better understand his country's history and recreate life under Stalin. So after visiting North Korea, he decided to shoot his project there because he thought life in North Korea was harder than in the Soviet Union. After 2 years of negotiations with the North Korean Ministry of Culture, he was granted permission for 1 research trip to the country with 3 different shooting periods of 15 days each, and he was only allowed to bring 2 more people. Per the contract, the Ministry of Culture would oversee and approve every aspect of the filming process, including the script, the characters, the cameras, and the scenes to be used in the film. Vitaly didn't like the idea, so he decided to bring a Russian translator as a fake sound assistant. The man was fluent in Korean and was actually supposed to be his spy. The project was a portrait of an 8-year-old schoolgirl named Jinmi and her family in Pyongyang, focusing on her preparation to join the Korean Children's Union on the day of the Shining Star, which is Kim Jong-il's birthday. At the end of each day of filming, North Korean authorities would review the footage and delete scenes they deemed unacceptable. Realizing that the North Korean government wanted to make a propaganda film, Mansky decided to keep the cameras rolling between shots. His crew employed a recording system that saved all footage to 2 separate memory cards, and Mansky submitted just one of the cards to the North Koreans for inspection while hiding the other copy. The film crew captured footage of North Korean handlers staging scenes and instructing characters on how to behave and what dialogue to say. At this point, Mansky decided to change the concept of the film and use the unapproved footage to make a behind-the-scenes expose. The film crew then smuggled the complete footage out of North Korea. The version of the film containing scenes approved by North Korea was 60 minutes long, while the director's cut, featuring unapproved footage, was 106 minutes. When the North Koreans realized what Vitaly and his crew had smuggled, they were furious and objected to the film's screening. They filed a complaint with the Russian Foreign Ministry, which was a production partner, seeking a ban on screenings of the film. The complaint, however, was unsuccessful. Following the film's release, Jinmi's family condemned the project, claiming that it was made dishonestly and edited in a selective way to produce an anti-North Korean movie. The family also claimed that it was Mansky who staged their daughter's scenes. Jinmi's mother stated, "Vitaly Mansky directed her. He told her what to do. We thought he was making the documentary to promote a friendly cultural exchange. We did not know Mansky was such a black-minded person." The film was screened at several film festivals around the world and was released in theaters in Russia, South Korea, and other countries, but it is still banned in North Korea. No fire zone. In 2009, Callum McRae, a Scottish filmmaker, decided to make a documentary about the ongoing civil war in Sri Lanka, which had been raging in the country for the last 26 years. The documentary focused on the final months of the war, in which war crimes were committed by the Sri Lankan military and the Tamil Tiger rebels. No footage was ever recorded by Callum himself. Instead, he decided to use footage recorded by both the victims and perpetrators on mobile phones and small cameras during the final 138 days of hell. The footage was so dramatic and disturbing that it was considered direct evidence of war crimes like summary execution, torture, and sexual violence. The events took place in designated safe zones that civilians used as a refugee from the war. They were initially lured by the government to these areas, only to be bombarded by air and land, as the army wanted to eradicate the last remnants of the Tamil Tigers hidden in the safe zone. In March 2013, the documentary was screened by its director, Callum McRae, at the 22nd session of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva. The film was not released in theaters in India, as the Central Board of Film Certification did not approve it. Sri Lanka's government called it propaganda, and Malaysia outright censored it. In response to this attempt at censorship, No Fire Zone was released online for free in India and Malaysia, as well as Sri Lanka and Nepal, where it was also banned or censored. Even the British Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, said, "No Fire Zone is one of the most chilling documentaries I've watched." It was nominated for Best Documentary at the 2014 International Emmy Awards and was awarded the Brit-Doc Impact Award. Earthlings. In 1999, Sean Monson, an American filmmaker, was commissioned to shoot footage on the castration of pets at some animal shelters in Los Angeles. What he saw moved him so much that he decided to turn it into a documentary. He decided to focus on the 5 big industries involved: pets, food, clothing, entertainment, and scientific research. Obtaining footage was a big challenge, so he decided to use hidden cameras to document the day-to-day practices. The film would take another 6 years to complete because of this difficulty. The footage was very graphic. It showed inhumane conditions inside factory farms, where animals were confined in cages, mutilated, and forcibly bred. It revealed cattle, pigs, chickens, and fish being killed in painful and unsanitary conditions. It also exposed fur farms where animals like foxes, rabbits, and minks were skinned alive for their pelts. It showed how cows were beaten and slaughtered for their skin. Elephants, tigers, and other animals were also beaten into submission with bullhooks and electric prods in circuses. Monkeys, rabbits, and rodents endured painful experiments without anesthesia for cosmetic testing. It was horrific, and these industries knew about it. They decided to block the release of the documentary, and major television networks and streaming platforms avoided promoting it because of its extreme and disturbing footage, but they were unsuccessful. Despite these challenges, Earthlings is still available online for free on various platforms. Academy Award-winning actor Joaquin Phoenix, who narrated the documentary, said, "Of all the films I've ever made, this is the one that gets people talking the most. For every one person who sees Earthlings, they will tell 3. Animal rights philosopher Tom Regan remarked, "For those who watch Earthlings, the world will never be the same." Fahrenheit 9/11. In 2003, Michael Moore, an American filmmaker, wanted to make a documentary about the September 11th attacks, but no one wanted to get involved due to its political nature. Mel Gibson stepped in and decided to finance the movie, but he was later replaced by Miramax, owned by film producer Harvey Weinstein. The film began by questioning if George W. Bush truly won the election in the 2000s, or if he was just declared as the winner early by the media. The documentary also explored the complex relationships between the US government, the Bush family, the Bin Laden family, the Saudi Arabian government, and the Taliban, which spanned 3 decades. Moore theorized that the United States government evacuated 24 members of the Bin Laden family on a secret flight shortly after the attacks, without subjecting them to any form of interrogation. He also argued that the terrorist attacks were used as an excuse to expand the war on terror, including the 2003 invasion of Iraq, among other controversial topics. After Fahrenheit 9/11 was nearly finished, Miramax held several preview screenings and informed Disney, its parent company, about the movie. Disney didn't like the idea, as it probably didn't want to be associated with such controversial topics, and tried to block the release of the documentary. Weinstein was furious and decided to leak the feud to the New York Times. Disney ended up selling the rights to the movie to Weinstein for $6 million, and also agreed that 60% of profits generated by the documentary would go to charity. The film debuted at the 2004 Cannes Film Festival, where it was awarded the Palme d'Or, the festival's highest award. It received generally positive reviews from critics, but it also generated intense controversy, including disputes over its accuracy. Conservative groups pressured theaters in the US to not run the film, but it backfired. On the opening weekend, the film generated box office revenues of $23.9 million in the United States and Canada, making it the weekend's top-grossing film. Its opening weekend earned more than the entire US theatrical run of any other feature-length documentary. Fahrenheit 9/11 was screened in a number of Middle Eastern countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Lebanon, and Egypt, but was immediately banned in Kuwait and heavily censored in Saudi Arabia. The film became the highest-grossing documentary of all time. The Cove. In 2008, Luis C. Hoyos, an American photographer and documentary film director, teamed up with former dolphin trainer-turned-activist Rick O'Barry to expose the dolphin hunting practices in Taiji, Wakayama, Japan. They discovered that a group of local fishermen engaged in dolphin drive hunting and sold trapped dolphins to aquariums and marine parks around the world. The dolphins that were not sold were instead driven into an isolated cove, surrounded by wire fences and keep out signs, just to then be killed. Their meat was later sold in local supermarkets across Japan. They weren't able to acquire permission permission from the Japanese government to film the practices in the cove, so they went to extreme lengths to get their footage, using equipment and tactics never previously used in a documentary film, including specialized high-definition cameras that were camouflaged to look like rocks, high-grade military thermal cameras, night vision cameras, and underwater microphones to capture sound. The footage showed dozens of dolphins being slaughtered every single day. They estimated that the number of dolphins killed in that single cove was greater than the number of whales killed in the Antarctic, and that the total number of dolphins killed by the whaling industry in Japan was higher than 23,000 per year. During the filming of the documentary, they realized that the local government officials were involved in helping to hide the slaughter. The Japanese public was largely unaware of all of this. Furthermore, the film stated that the dolphins' meat contained dangerously high levels of mercury. As the premiere approached, the documentary received mixed reviews. On one hand, the Japanese government said dolphin hunting was a part of the traditional fishery of their country, and it had been lawfully carried out, accusing the documentary of being biased and disrespectful toward Japanese culture. On the other side, it started a global outrage, leading to protests and pressure on Japan to stop the hunts. The documentary was heavily censored by the authorities, and a handful of theaters in Japan showed the film, sometimes facing threats from right-wing nationalist groups. Dolphins are protected from hunting in most parts of the world due to their high intelligence. Unfortunately, the practices shown in the film are still being done to this day. The Cove received worldwide critical acclaim and won several awards for Best Documentary, including the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature at the 82nd Academy Awards. Titicut Follies. In 1967, Frederick Wiseman, a former lawyer, wanted to make his first documentary, aiming to reveal what happened inside mental asylums. In the 1960s, these institutions already had a poor reputation, and he intended to create a raw, unbiased recording. Somehow, he convinced the head of Bridgewater State Hospital in Massachusetts to let him film inside, even though no one had done so before. However, there was a condition. He had to be accompanied at all times by medical staff. Wiseman ended up recording around 80 hours of raw footage, exposing the indescribable horrors patients endured, such as bullying, neglect, humiliation, and extremely unhygienic conditions. We won't go too in-depth for obvious reasons, but one infamous scene shows an inmate being force-fed while a guard mocks him. As Wiseman prepared for the film's premiere, a group of government officials intervened and halted its release. The documentary exposed a broken system where mentally ill criminals were not treated but dehumanized, something the Massachusetts government likely didn't want anything to do with. If the documentary had been released, the patients' families might have sued. The official reason for the ban was that the film violated patient privacy and dignity, but Wiseman, as a former lawyer, fought to bring the truth to light. However, after a lengthy legal battle, the film was officially banned in 1968. Authorities ordered all copies to be pulled from theaters and destroyed. This became the first movie ban in U.S. history, for reasons other than national security or obscenity. It remained banned until 1991, when it was finally allowed to be released on the condition that it included a disclaimer explaining how much Bridgewater State Hospital had changed over the years. The War Game. In 1965, Peter Watkins, an English filmmaker, was working at the BBC when he was commissioned to do a documentary about what would happen if a nuclear bomb dropped in the United Kingdom. At the height of the Cold War, British society had to live under constant threat of a nuclear catastrophe. Watkins took the job very seriously and recruited top scientists in the field. The documentary shows the county of Kent, England, being hit by a nuclear bomb, causing homes to be instantly reduced to ash. People suffering from severe burns and widespread fires overwhelming emergency services. Law and order collapsed as food shortages, radiation sickness, and mass displacement led to social chaos. The government response seemed useless and highly inefficient. When the documentary was finished, Watkins presented it to his bosses at the BBC, and they were horrified. The BBC, being a media company controlled by the British government, decided to consult with top officials about the release of the documentary. They did not approve it. Even the Prime Minister of Great Britain viewed it and disapproved of it. Therefore, the BBC refused to air the film in 1966, with the official reason being that it was deemed too scary. In reality, they feared it would undermine public trust in civil defense. However, it was shown to very select audiences and premiered at the National Film Theatre in London on the 13th of April 1966, where it ran until the 3rd of May. It was then shown abroad at several film festivals, including Venice, where it won the special prize. But it was never broadcast on live TV in the United Kingdom. Despite the ban, it won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature in 1967. The documentary became an urban legend in the UK, and people only knew about it because of word of mouth. The ban remained in place for 20 years. Finally, the film was eventually televised in Great Britain on the 31st of July 1985, during the week before the 40th anniversary of the Hiroshima bombing.